Hello viewers, my name is Damilare. In this class, we'll be continuing with the topic nutrition, and we start with micronutrients and macronutrients. Once you hear micro means small, but if you hear macro means large. So meaning micronutrients are mineral salts required by living organisms in small quantities, while macronutrients are nutrients required in large quantities. I will start by giving the examples of macronutrients before I come back to micronutrients. Examples of macronutrients mean that nutrients that are needed in large quantities. We have nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, potassium, magnesium, calcium, iron, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. You'll notice that almost everything, or in short, all the elements I listed here, they are majorly found in the first 20 elements, apart from this iron. So meaning you can easily identify your macronutrients from the first 20 elements. So this is N, P, that means nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, then K, which is potassium, magnesium, which is Mg, calcium, Ca, then carbon, which is C, hydrogen, which is H, oxygen, which is O. So these are elements that are common in the first 20 elements. But for iron, it is not part of them. So it means just identify iron as part of macronutrients, though not among the first 20 elements. So you can remember with the fertilizer NPK. NPK is part of the macronutrients. They are very important to plants and animals. Then sulfur, magnesium, calcium. So they are also very important, or you use CAMP to remember, CAMP, where the Ca is the calcium, the M represent the magnesium, the P phosphorus. And also you can remember that water, H2O, is very important. So meaning the hydrogen is also needed in large quantity, and oxygen. So these are the elements that are needed in large quantities by plants. Now we want to look at carbon as one of the macronutrients. Carbon enters the plants in combination with oxygen, that's as carbon 4 oxide molecules, meaning that it is very important, it is needed in large quantities. It is used for synthesis of carbohydrates. Even from the name carbohydrate, it means there is carbon and there is hydrate. The hydrate is the water. Also in protein, you will see the carbon there, because it's part of organic compound. Fats, complexes, they are all having the carbon in them. So this complex of these substances, they are also found or useful as respiratory substances for the supply of energy. Another element which will be our case study is hydrogen. So hydrogen is also needed in large quantities by living organisms. Hydrogen enters the plants in combination with oxygen as water. You see, plants takes water because it's very important. So meaning that hydrogen also must be in large quantity, and it is used for oxidation and reduction process, because the H it will be for reduction while the O will be for oxidation. The hydrogen ion, they can maintain acid-base balance of cell fluid. So that shows us the importance of these macro elements. Oxygen is another important macro element. Oxygen enters the plant as carbon dioxide and or water, meaning we can see oxygen in carbon dioxide, we can also see it in water. And as molecular oxygen from the atmosphere, it means it can also be absorbed, that's through respiration. We call it aerobic. Aerobic respiration means breathing that involves oxygen. Nitrogen is another important macro element. It's very important. It is obtained as nitrogenous compound in soil solution. Nitrogen is used for amino acids, and that's why from the formula of amino, NH2, it means nitrogen is there. So amino acid formation and protein and other nitrogenous compound. Phosphorus is another important macronutrient. Phosphorus is absorbed from the soil solution in the form of phosphate ions. It serves as buffer in the cell sap, that means like a shield. It's also used in the formation of coenzymes. When you look at coenzymes, you can see nitrogen in phosphorus in coenzymes like the NADP, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. So the NADP, it means from the N we can see nitrogen, the P we can see phosphorus. So the N is the nicotinamide, the A is the adenine, then the D dinucleotide, while the P the phosphate. So meaning that phosphorus is present there. So it's working with the coenzyme, and that's in glycolysis, and also in adenine phosphates we find it there. So telling us the importance of phosphorus. Then sulfur is another element. Sulfur is absorbed from the soil solution as sulfate ions. It means when sulfate ions or sulfur fertilizer, when it's absorbed into the plant, the sulfur will be very useful. So sulfur is contained also in amino acids such as cysteine, methionine. It may be used in chlorophyll formation. When you look at chlorophyll formation, sulfur has a way of helping in forming chlorophyll. Potassium is another important macronutrient, very important to plants. It is absorbed as potassium ion. It is used or important in protein synthesis. When you talk of protein, you have to mention potassium. Chlorophyll formation, the potassium also aids in the formation of chlorophyll. Why? Because the chlorophyll has to do with green pigments in plants. When you see the plants showing green color, it's as a result of the chlorophyll, and that chlorophyll was formed with the help of potassium. And in carbon assimilation also, when you talk of carbon assimilation, that means how carbon is being used or is taken in by the plant. Now we also have magnesium as another macronutrient. That means nutrient that is needed in large quantity. It is absorbed as magnesium ion, used for chlorophyll formation as well, just as potassium is important for chlorophyll formation, and as sulfur is also important for chlorophyll formation. So you can just merge those three elements that are for chlorophyll formation together for remembrance as SKM, or just say SKIM. So from SKIM, it means sulfur, potassium, and magnesium. They are for chlorophyll formation. You can use the idea of SKIM and SKIM. It means skin has to do with color. So if skin is color, then SKIM, sulfur, potassium, magnesium, you can use it to remember as part of the elements that can form chlorophyll. For magnesium, magnesium is a catalyst in glycolytic reaction. That means when you are doing glycolysis, that is breakdown of glucose to produce energy, magnesium will catalyze it, make it very fast. Calcium is another important macronutrients. When you look at calcium, it is absorbed as calcium ion, is used for plant cell formation. So when you look at when cell is being formed, so calcium will support this formation. Then iron. Iron, the one I said is not part of the first 20 elements, but it's part of the macronutrient. Iron is very important. It's absorbed as iron 2 or iron 3 ion, and it's essential for respiration, respiratory enzyme. So in the presence of respiration, iron is needed. And chlorophyll, so also for chlorophyll. So just like the SKM, so you can add iron, you can put the I, though iron is Fe, but for the easy remembrance, so once you remember SKIM, skim, so the I can represent iron there. So even though I is for iodine. Okay, now we move to micronutrients. Those ones that are needed in small quantities. Why are they needed in small quantity? Because when they are too much, it will begin to affect the plant. So we have boron, manganese, zinc, copper, molybdenum, chlorine, vanadium, cobalt, silicon. These are needed in small quantities. It should not be too much in plants. Let's start with boron as the first element that is needed in small quantity. So boron is just for apical meristem. Apical from the word apex, the top. That means for the top of the plant. So boron will help to make plants shoot up. So for apical meristem. Then translocation of sugar. You know, when sugar is formed in the leaf, it has to be translocated, means move around the body of the plant. So boron is very good at that. And uptake of calcium, for calcium to be taken up, boron can support. It is absorbed from the soil. That boron, we get it from the soil in form of borate ion, BO2 minus, borate ion. Then that leads us to another micronutrient. Manganese should not be too much in the body of plant, that's Mn. Manganese is absorbed as manganese ion, that's Mn2 plus. It is present in green plants and associated with the respiratory enzyme. That means those enzymes, they always speed up reaction. So zinc is another one, that's Zn2 plus. So zinc is absorbed as zinc Zn2 plus and is a constituent of the enzyme carbohydrates. So meaning that it's also helps to form carbohydrate. Then copper is another micronutrient. When you look at copper, it is involved in respiratory processes, meaning that our breathing, or the respiration of plants, majorly plant, these are majorly needed in plants. So in the respiratory process of plants, so copper will support. Then molybdenum. So the molybdenum is also essential, but this one is for normal growth in some plants, when the only form of nitrogen available is nitrate. So here we have seen macro and micronutrients. So the functions are arranged here on this table. So for magnesium, take note, chlorophyll. Also iron, chlorophyll. So those ones that are for chlorophyll, like I said, you can use Kim to remember. So this S is for the sulfur, the K, that's potassium. So meaning that here we also still have chlorophyll. So it means chlorophyll is here, even though it's not mentioned, but we have seen it in the previous explanations. So the S for sulfur is also for chlorophyll formation. Then the K, potassium, for chlorophyll formation, the iron, chlorophyll, then magnesium, chlorophyll formation. So we have to first select all those ones that are for chlorophyll formation for easy remembrance. Then another thing is that for magnesium, you can even remember magnesium from the name Maggi. The Maggi, that's your seasoning. You know, there's a particular one that is yellowish in color. So using that, remember that chlorophyll, once magnesium is absent, the leaf will become yellow. So, but if it's present, it will be green. So that's magnesium. Magnesium can also be used to activate coenzymes. That's in the glycolysis process. So it will make coenzyme to function, and then it will promote growth. So, but the deficiency, once there is no magnesium, the growth will be poor and there will be chlorosis. That means the color will be yellow. Calcium will help in the formation of cell wall. You can use letter C of cell wall to remember calcium. That calcium will help for cell wall and activation of some enzymes. So we can also use the AC in the calcium to remember activation. So to activate enzymes. So it helps. Then for magnesium, you can use the letter G to remember growth. Growth for then still on calcium, apart from activation of some enzymes, it also gives rigidity to plants. You can use the idea of calcium helping bones, human bones, and bone will make human rigid. So the way bone is for rigidity, that's how the calcium in plant is also for rigidity. So there are deficiency, since calcium helps to form cell wall. It means if it is deficient, then the cell wall will not be it will not stand firm. So meaning that there will be a stunted growth and there can be deaths of terminal bud. That means it will not be shooting up. So it will not be shooting up, since what will make it stand is missing, calcium, making plants stand rigid, making it to perform. So the growth will be stunted and the terminal bud may be affected, and then poor root development. The roots will not be able to develop. Then iron, formation of chlorophyll and formation of protein. Remember that iron is a good protein element, and that's why when you buy this blood tonic, you will see iron there. So meaning it is proteinous elements. Now for the deficiency, once there is iron is missing, then that will cause poor growth, and also leaves turn yellow. Remember we mentioned it earlier from the scheme that SKIM, they are for chlorophyll. chlorophyll, that means making something green. So mean that if iron is missing, then there will be yellowing of leaves. Then why will the growth be poor if iron is missing? Remember, iron is for protein, and protein also develops plants, make plants grows. So meaning that if it's missing, there will be poor growth. Nitrogen is for proper root development and also for protein synthesis. Remember that protein majorly, even from the amino NH3, it means nitrogen is part of the protein formula. When you look at the amino acid, which is the product of protein, you will see N there. So nitrogen is for protein. Then you can also use the roots from letter R of nitrogen, to remember that it's for root development. Then nucleic acid synthesis, nucleic acid, you can use the letter N to remember nucleic. Then component of chlorophyll, so it's also the component of chlorophyll and enzymes. So meaning that apart from skin, we can still include N. So to remember skin has to do with color. So nitrogen is also part of the chlorophyll components and also enzymes. You can use the En of the nitrogen to remember the enzymes. So En to remember enzyme. So the deficiency of this nitrogen will cause stunted growth, because once protein is affected, the growth will be affected. Then also chlorosis, meaning that once the chlorophyll is not formed, there will be yellowing of leaves. Then poor flower and fruit formation. Since the nitrogen is the major protein product, it means it will not allow the flower and the fruit to be well formed. So that leads us to phosphorus. Phosphorus is good for formation of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, even from the name phosphate, meaning that that's phosphorus. Also DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. So being a ribonucleic, it means it's a proteinous element. So it means it is also good for DNA. The RNA, ribonucleic, from the nucleic, showing that it's also part of the proteinous substances, so RNA. Then stem and root formation. Remember that phosphorus is part of proteinous element, so mean that anything proteinous will support growth either at the top or at the root or stem. So stem and root formation. Then phosphorus can also be a coenzyme, just like we have known in the NADP, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate, so NADP. So that's the P now represents phosphorus. So meaning that from the coenzyme we can find phosphorus. Also in protein formation, remember that protein, it needs nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium sometimes, then majorly the carbon and the likes. So meaning phosphorus is also good for protein. You can also use the P of the phosphorus to remember protein. Then since phosphorus has to do with protein, it means the deficiency will cause stunted growth, poor root development. Now let's move to sulfur. Sulfur is also for protein synthesis. So like I said, most of the proteinous elements, sulfur, phosphorus, nitrogen, so they are majorly there to help growth. So and that's why once it's deficient, there will be stunted growth. So it can also cause chlorosis, because it means sulfur can also be good for chlorophyll from the skin, as I said earlier. Now we move to potassium. Potassium, letter though P, the K is actually the symbol of potassium, but we use letter P of the potassium to remember protein synthesis. So meaning that protein synthesis also involve potassium. So if we want to count all those elements that are for potassium, that are for protein, so we can mention nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, potassium. So they are all for protein formation. So even from the spelling here, so you can still say those ones that are for chlorophyll, in one way or the other, they are also for protein. So meaning that potassium is still for protein synthesis, cell membrane formation. Remember, it's protein. Protein has to do with the growth of plant, so especially the surrounding. Then also for to activate respiration and also for photosynthesis. So once this potassium is deficient, the leaf margin will turn yellow. so it will turn yellow. That's for the leaf margin, and it will become brown. It will become brown. Then it can lead to premature death, because potassium is also part of what enable plants to grow. Now we look at those ones that should not be much. That means micronutrients. Manganese, what is the work? Is to activate enzyme. So let's just use the idea of a man. A man will always activate. That means tell you go and do work, do this or that. So it means use it to remember that it will activate enzyme, which is involved in cellular respiration and photosynthesis. So once it is not there, there will be death of shoots. That means the plants will not be able to shoot up. So because it is when there is photosynthesis that plants can grow. Then the next one, zinc. Zinc is necessary for synthesis of the starting material, tryptophan of auxin. So remember, auxin is for shooting up of plants. So if you want to see the starting material of that auxin, which is tryptophan, zinc is very important. You can use the zinc as a starter. The Z like S, so it's starter. That means to help plant to shoot up. So that's for it. But if it is not there, it will not be able to shoot up. That means there will be poor growth. Zinc can also activate some enzymes, and it's play, so meaning that most of these micronutrients, they are always doing the work of activation. They activate enzyme, most of them. So they activate enzymes. So we have seen that of this zinc also, which will do the work of activation. Then it plays a role in synthesis of protein. Zinc can also help in protein synthesis. So we can use ZIP to remember that zinc and protein. Zinc for protein synthesis. Then copper is another element. When we look at copper, is a component of respiratory enzymes. So those enzymes that will help during respiration, copper is part of them, and is present in materials which act as electron carrier for chlorophyll. So electron carrier for chlorophyll. So and once it's missing, there will be poor growth. Then boron. Boron is for translocation of sugar. Once sugar is formed in the leaf, boron will, let's use the idea of B as boss, like the boss that will drive the sugar that is formed around the plant. So meaning that boron is for translocation of sugar and calcium. So once it's missing, there will be poor growth. Remember that sugar must be translocated to help plant to grow. So then there will also be poor growth of pollen tube. So once it is missing. Molybdenum is necessary for nitrogen fixation by nitrogen fixing bacteria. So for nitrogen fixation by nitrogen fixing bacteria. So it means this nitrogen fixing bacteria need molybdenum to help it in releasing nitrogen. And again, it can also activate enzyme. Like I said, most of these micronutrients, they are always activating enzyme. So in short, we can just merge them together, starting with molybdenum, so which is Mb, so representing the activator of enzyme. Then another thing that activates enzyme, so as we mentioned, that's zinc. So you can also include zinc as element that activates enzyme. Then manganese. So manganese is another element that activates enzyme. So it means even from the spelling of enzyme, when you spell En, then you can get Z. Zinc will activate enzyme. So as you continue, YME. So the M, you remember manganese and you remember molybdenum. So then still looking at molybdenum activating enzyme that reduces nitrate to nitrite. Now then, once it is missing, there will be poor growth. Then we move to chlorine. Chlorine is necessary for oxygen release during photosynthesis. So it can also affect growth. Nickel. Nickel is necessary for nitrogen metabolism. So we can use the N and the N. Remember N for nitrogen. So then Ni from the Ni of nickel. So nitrogen nickel. So then this same nickel, once it's missing, there will be stunted growth and chlorosis. So meaning that you can still mix the Ni with skin. Remember, they are majorly for chlorophyll. So we have mentioned SKIN earlier, the sulfur, the potassium, the iron, the nitrogen, and now you can take Ni to the back as nickel. So they are very important to help prevent chlorosis. Then finally, silicon. Silicon is for cell wall formation. So you can just say silicon, just like a ceiling of the roof. So use that to remember ceiling and ceiling of the roof. So in what way? That means to help to form the cell wall. Maybe you are trying to prevent armed robbery, so you have to make sure the ceiling is well formed. So meaning it's for cell formation, and it may affect growth once it is missing. Then another aspect we'll now fully look at today is nutrition in mammals. So for nutrition in mammals, so we have to start with food substances. And when we say food substances, it has to do with different um, substances that can help in producing energy. Or this particular aspect, maybe we can even talk more about this in the next class, so that this one will be a wrap up. So from this class now, we have been able to look at the aspect of micronutrients and macronutrients. So thanks for listening.